I am Vicki Crawford, Director of the Morehouse College Martin Luther King Jr. Collection, and I am here today, Friday, July 7th, on the campus of Morehouse College in the Ray Charles Performing Arts Center, interviewing attorney Thomas Sampson, who is a graduate of the class of 1968 and managing partner of the law firm Thomas Kennedy Sampson and Tompkins, the oldest African-American law firm in the state of Georgia. Thank you so much for joining us here today, Attorney Sampson.
You're quite welcome. I'm honored and delighted to be here.
Well, let's get started looking at your early years, your years growing up in Durham, North Carolina. We want to get a sense of what that was like, a little bit about your parents, your mother and your father. What are your recollections of that time?
All right. Well, I was born in Boston, Massachusetts in 1946, and my dad was a student when I was born in 46. He was a student in law school at Boston University School of Law. And the family at that point in time consisted of my mother and father and my oldest sister of about 18 months. And then I came upon the scene in 1946. We remained in Boston until my dad finished his study at Boston University. He received the LLB degree, the Bachelor of Legal Letters. Today, we receive the JD. It's a different title, but for the same period of study. So he received the LLB, and then he went for another year at Boston University and got a Master of Legal Letters degree. And in 1952, when he received his master's in legal letters, we moved to Durham, North Carolina. He got a job offer as an assistant professor at North Carolina Central Law School there in Durham, North Carolina. So I grew up, for all practical purposes, most of my young life was spent in Durham. And I stayed in Durham until I came to Morehouse College in 1964.
Tell me a little bit about your mother. She was a professor, is that correct?
Yes, she was. My mother and father, ironically, met at Morehouse and Spelman. My dad was at Morehouse and my mother was at Spelman. And they fell in love and got married. And my mother's area, her profession was an English teacher. She was, that was her specialty. She taught English and she taught drama there at North Carolina Central University and remained there for many years. That was her chosen profession. And my dad, of course, he started at North Carolina Central University, and he retired after teaching there for more than 40 years. One period of time, during his latter years, he was actually the dean of the law school there in Durham, North Carolina. So both my mother and father were college professors and university professors there at the law school.
Wow, and what was that like in an era of Jim Crow segregation, in an era of 1940s, 1950s, and African Americans achieving like your parents? What was that like growing up in a middle-class family like that?
Well, when I think about, reflect back on my dad and mom and my upbringing, they were both tremendous influences in my life. And they imparted certain ideals and expectations on the part of myself and my other siblings. Our family consisted eventually of 4 children. I have 3 other siblings. And all of us were taught at an early age about the importance of hard work, about the importance of having a value system. We were taught about doing the right thing. And a lot of our lessons were really learned around the kitchen table. We watched the news every night. And growing up during the heart of the civil rights era was something to behold, because it was almost like every night there would be something on the television, something on the airways. You might see one evening Bull Connor utilizing his dogs to attack certain demonstrators, using fire hoses to spray them down and to prevent them from demonstrating in a very peaceful manner. We had a person from the state of North Carolina who was an avowed segregationist, and his name was Jesse Helms. And we all know about Jesse Helms and his racist rhetoric, and he would oftentimes be on the evening news spouting out just degrading and dehumanizing things about the protests that were underway, castigating black people for their involvement. He was just an awful person when it came to human rights and fair play and equality. And many of our lessons at the kitchen table were about people who were making a difference in the civil rights era and were helping our people. My dad never pushed me or any of my siblings into the law. And looking back on it, I think that was by design. I think he felt that if he pushed us, we might not go in that direction. So instead of pushing us, he made us acutely aware of how important the work of lawyers was. He told us about, Charles Houston. He told us about Thurgood Marshall. He told us about those lawyers that were carving out and fighting for the rights of minorities, for black people who were trying to level the playing field. And he would just go on and on about the importance of their work. And we would just all be there at the table soaking this in, not realizing that not only was he trying to inform us, but I think looking back, he was trying to get us interested in the law and understand that through the law, changes could be made which were so important for our people and for our race. My mother they were like two peas in a pod. And being an English professor, she was very, very strict about use of the correct word. And if we made comments or asked questions, you better not split a verb, because she would say, no, that's not the correct way. The correct way is, and then she would give it. So those influences in my early, life were so important to the work that I've tried to do, and their influence was just so important to me in terms of our development, my development, and the ideals and the principles that they utilized in trying to direct us. And one of the things, when I think about the ideals that and the virtues that they espoused, there were several there were many, but there were several that just fundamentally are so important to me looking back. One was always do your best, strive for excellence. And they inspired us me and my siblings to always strive for excellence. Always. Don't do it if you're not going to put your heart in it completely. Strive for excellence. That resonates with me even today. And a second principle or virtue that was so important in terms of my upbringing was have some values. Have some values. Academic excellence is fine, but in and of itself, it's not enough. You've got to have a good value system. And growing out of that principle, several things come to mind. My dad always said, son, be honest and have integrity. Whatever you do, always be honest. In fact, the only time I can ever recall getting a whipping, either me or my older sister, it was about whether we had told the truth. And there was only one whipping that each of us got about that. And that was it. From that point forward, we had learned our lesson. We would tell the truth. And he would always say, if you tell me the truth, we'll talk about it. You won't get a whipping. You may get punished, but you won't get a whipping. And that set the mold. Never again. And at a very early age, we learned the importance of being truthful and honest.
Well, let's fast forward to coming to Morehouse. You arrived in Morehouse in 1964, would that be right?
That's correct.
And I'm curious to know your first impressions when you got here, what stood out about the college. Let's talk about the Morehouse years.
All right. I only applied to one school, and that was Morehouse College. And I laugh today about it. I said, it's a good thing they let me in, because if they hadn't, I wouldn't have had any place to go. But I had heard about Morehouse from a very early age. My dad was born in Sumter, South Carolina. And as we know, that was Benjamin E. Mays' home. My dad's mother revered, as did my dad and my mom and my entire family, the older people who knew of him and who had come to Morehouse. They would speak of him so highly. And he was just like, he was an icon. He was somebody that was revered and was held in the highest of esteem. And I wanted to come to Morehouse. I only wanted to come to Morehouse. As I mentioned, my mother had gone to Spelman, and my dad had gone to Morehouse, and I have some other relatives, some aunts and uncles who had gone to Morehouse and Spelman. And so, in fact, my older sister had come to Spelman. She was 2 years ahead of me. And so there was no place else that I was interested in coming but to Morehouse College. And looking back on 1964, I recognize how important it was for a young black man to be at a place like Morehouse College in 1964 during the heart of the civil rights movement. There was no better place, in my opinion, to be for a young black man than at Morehouse College. We all had gone through and experienced the indignities and the inhumanity and the cruelty of a segregated life and a racist life. We had all seen and indeed participated in demonstrations, marches, And we knew the cruelty and the inhumanity and the indignity of that we had suffered. And looking back during that era that I grew up in, you had in 1954 the Brown versus Board of Education decision, holding unconstitutional the Plessy versus Ferguson decision in 1896, the separate but equal doctrine. Needless to say, society, the nation was in a turmoil when Chief Justice Earl Warren announced the Brown versus Board of Education decision, which was ironically a unanimous decision. All 9 justices, and there were Republicans on that court as well as Democrats. But one of the strengths of Earl Warren was that he could bring people together, and he sought for unanimity, and oftentimes guided in many of the crucial decisions that the Warren Court ruled on during that period. So we had in 1954 the Brown versus Board of Education decision. I was 8 years old when that decision was rendered. And I remember just the impact and the news coverage. And following that, in 1955, we started seeing really just some terrible reaction that I think that decision in part fueled. Emmett Till was killed in August of 1955 in Money, Mississippi. And that killing, I think, when the pendulum swings one way in favor of, say, black folks and minorities, as the Brown decision was, you often see a reaction to that progress. And I think that's what we had in the Emmett Till decision in 1955, that murder. Interesting enough, when that murder occurred, it was later that year in December of 55 that we had the Montgomery bus march. And many people attribute that bus march as a reaction to the killing, in part, of Emmett Till some 6 months beforehand. You move on forward, and in 1963, we had the Mississippi workers, Cheney, I think Goodwin, and Schwerner, in 1963. And in 1964, of course, President Kennedy was killed in 63, and then we had the passage of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 in July, a month before I arrived on Morehouse College's campus. So that was the kind of the framework of what had gone on in our lives, those of us who came and embarked on our journey through Morehouse in 1964. We had seen through our development at that point just the cruelties of a segregated society and the terrible reactions that it could cause through those events that I've just outlined. And those of us who came into the class of 64 couldn't have had a better mentor or a better leader than Benjamin E. Mays, somebody I had heard so much about growing up. And so I was just honored and revered him to the highest, and first met him during freshman week in August of 1964. And I met him at a tea that he and his wife Sadie were known to have during those times. Our class was not the first one, I'm sure, that had been invited to have a tea with Dr. Mays and Sadie. It had happened before, I'm sure, but our class was invited, and he broke the class up into small groups of maybe 10 to 12 people, 10 to 12 men, young men. And he wanted those small groups because he made it a point to come and sit next to each of us for maybe 5 or 6 minutes. Young man, what is your name? What would you like to do with your life? What are you interested in? And he went around the entire room, spending just a few minutes with each of us. And looking back, the impact that had on us and on me, I can't describe. That was a form of the nourishment that we got as young Morehouse men. We got, not only were we inspired, but we were nourished. We were taught about the importance of ideals and values, which is missing so often in today's society when you look at our institutions, whether it be Congress, unfortunately, the Supreme Court. You can have academic excellence, but if you don't have a strong value system, you are wanting.
Let's talk about your recollections about attending chapel. What was chapel all about at Morehouse College?
Well, chapel, it's very interesting thinking back on it. We were not very happy with the thought of going to chapel, quite frankly. Not realizing then the benefits that would come to us through that experience. We did not like the fact of having to get up at 8 o'clock on, I think, Tuesday and Thursday to go to chapel. It just did not sit well with us. And looking back, it was one of the most important things and impactful things that occurred during these chapel sessions. We were exposed to, can you imagine, Howard Thurman, for example, was a speaker, one of the greatest ministers, preachers of all time. We just didn't understand then the benefit that we were getting from going to chapel. We would oftentimes hear from Dr. Mays, and that was always special. And he always had a special message for you. And it was at those special sessions of chapel that you would hear many of his quotes, for example, his quotations, for example, on doing your best, he would often say, "Gentlemen, strive to do your work so well that no man living, dead, nor yet unborn could do it any better." And he would discuss with us. I remember in particular a chapel session when he talked about voluntary segregation. And we said, "What?" He said, "Gentlemen," he said, "some things you might not be able to do because the law doesn't allow you. But the law does not compel you to go to the Fox Theater and sit in the balcony. Gentlemen, that is voluntary segregation. You don't have to go there. You have to follow the law and in terms of public accommodations and sit in the back of the bus and do this and that by law, but you don't have to go and sit in the balcony at the Fox Theater. That's voluntary segregation. And then there were other people, Dean Brazil, who is, was such a delightful person, delightful personality, and was such a comical character in so many respects, but beloved. And he would talk about certain simple things. He would tell us about what was expected of a Morehouse man and how you treat a lady. And we would have the best time looking back, laughing at some of his lectures to us on the appropriate way, the way a Morehouse man should act. I remember one Tuesday morning chapel session when he was teaching us about, he said, when you pass a lady on the street, always tip your hat and speak to her. Good morning, ma'am. Good afternoon, ma'am. He said, that's what a gentleman does. Another session he talked about the number of handkerchiefs that a Morehouse man should carry. We thought it was just hilarious. And somebody might holler out, how many is that, Dean Brazil? He said, well, a Morehouse man should always have at least 3 handkerchiefs. You can imagine the hoot and holler. He said, first, you should always have, for your physical appearance, you should always have a handkerchief in your coat pocket up front. He says, that's for appearance sake. That's how a Morehouse man dresses. He said, on the inside of your jacket, you should have another handkerchief in case a young lady needs her brow patted down. He said, and finally, you should have a handkerchief in your back pocket. He said, that handkerchief is for purposes of personal use, such as wiping your nose, gentlemen. Oh, we hooped and hollered about it, that lesson, but that's the type of thing that Morehouse stood for. Not only did it inspire, but there was a nurturing element. And through that nurturing element, they imparted values and ideals that could carry us through life and would be important to us in going forward. And so that's what chapel, when I look back at it, those lessons just emanated from those sessions of chapel twice a week.
Are there other professors that stand out that had an impact on you?
Absolutely. One of the things that Dr. Mays had done was we had a world-class faculty. When I arrived in 1964, it was interesting because there were several professors here who had taught my father. Dr. E.A. Jones was one of them. And we all know the importance of Dr. Jones. He was a French teacher and wrote the book, A Candle in the Dark. Well, he actually taught my dad back in 1939. Dr. Robert Brisbane was another giant. He was just such a wonderful, impeccably dressed, wonderful human being, great teacher, great inspirator. He inspired us to always do our best, and he was a cherished member of the faculty. Dr. Tobe Johnson was another. He didn't teach my father, as I recall. I think he came to Morehouse a couple of years after my father had graduated, but another just tremendous, tremendous teacher. Dr. Anna Grant was another wonderful professor who taught sociology, and she was no nonsense, believe me. Dr. Jeanette Hume in the English department, Dr. Mapp in the biology department. I could go on. It was just a world-class faculty. And during my 4 years at Morehouse, Morehouse was awarded the Phi Beta Kappa Charter and Distinction. And that was because of Dr. Mays' efforts in assembling this world-class faculty that Morehouse had. I think, as I understand it, one of the requirements in order to get the Phi Beta Kappa designation is that you must have a certain percentage of your instructors who have the PhD degree. And in 1967, Morehouse College was awarded that distinction. And that was because of Dr. Mays' efforts in assembling just a wonderful, wonderful group of professors.
So tell me a little bit about the social life during your college years. You met and married, you met your wife, Jacqueline. Talk a little bit about that. She's a Spelman grad.
I met my wife, Jackie, actually freshman year, and we started dating my second year when I was a sophomore and she was a sophomore. She was from Albany, Georgia, and she and her twin sister, Gwenny, had come to Spelman, a school that her mother had attended. And we met and fell in love and got married when we graduated in 1968, June 5th. At that time, I was going on to law school, and so we wanted to get married, and I was going back to Durham, North Carolina to start my law career, but we met and started dating my second year at Morehouse. Morehouse men, you know, the Morehouse-Spelman connection is just one that is so important, and so many instances of Morehouse men and Spelman women uniting. I mean, it's Spelman has always held a very special place in the hearts of all Morehouse men, and hopefully we are held in the same esteem and have the same love for them as they have for us, hopefully. But that's where we met. Jackie and I met, and Atlanta was a great place to be. We had wonderful institutions here. We had Clark University, of course. We had Atlanta University. We had Morris Brown, and of course Spelman and Morehouse and the Interdenominational Theological Center. So it was just a vibrant community where you could take classes at the other institutions. I never forget, I took a couple of courses at Clark, took a course at Morris Brown. So you had an opportunity to really mix and mingle and socialize and meet people at all of the surrounding institutions. But Spelman always held a very special place in the hearts of Morehouse men.
So by the time you graduated in 1968, Dr. King was assassinated. Talk to us about, what was the mood on campus, or what was it like? What was the climate like in Atlanta after that? What are your recollections of that period?
That was my senior year in 1968, and I could never forget the impact that had on all of us at Morehouse, because in addition to Martin Luther King being a world leader, somebody who is revered to this day, as we all know, is just one of the greatest leaders of the 20th century, a world-class leader. But he was a Morehouse man too, which was so important to us and so inspirational for all of us. And so we had a special kinship, I guess, with all Morehouse men, and certainly in particular Dr. Martin Luther King and what he meant to our race and what he meant to our people and to our struggle. And that was a period of intense sadness, and I can still recall going to the 4th floor of Graves Hall and looking out there across a quadrangle where his eulogy was being delivered by Dr. Benjamin E. Mays, which just rings in my mind to this day. And watching the scores and scores of thousands of people walking behind the wagon carrying his coffin, all of the celebrities that you could name, all of the political figures from around the country and indeed the world who had attended his funeral. It was as if you were stunned, living in it was as if it was an out-of-body experience almost, his death and his funeral and his eulogy. And Dr. Mays delivered a eulogy that was beyond description. He talked about one of the things that I remember so distinctly. There were several, but in his eulogy he pointed out that it's not how long somebody lives, it's how well they live. And he talked about people who had lost their lives at a very early age. Indeed, Jesus, Joan of Arc. And there were a litany of people that he talked about who led very short lives, but who made such an impact during their life on matters that were so important to humanity and to the world. And that's something I would never forget. It's not how long you live, it's how well you live. Just a very sobering time when we as a people were just crushed to the earth by the magnitude of his assassination. But then we rose. We all recognized that it was something that we had to go on and carry the mantle and to try to, through our lives and through our living, espouse and the ideals that are important in life in terms of doing what we could do as young men graduating from Morehouse College. We were supposed to go into our varied professions with a desire not only for excellence, but for espousing and showing the world and all that we met, imparting our ideals, our value system on our communities and on the people that we met. And that was the impact of his death and the message. And I think the scope of what we wanted the world to know about us as Morehouse men. And so I think when we graduated, when Dr. King was murdered in '68, we left Morehouse, the students of my era and of that class left Morehouse with a determination. We felt armed, that we had been nurtured, we had been inspired, we believed that we could do anything as well as anybody else. As Howard Thurman, who graduated in the class of 1923, one of his quotes was, above her students' heads, Morehouse holds a crown that she challenges her students to grow tall enough to wear. And when we set forth upon graduation into the world, I think we carried that message. Morehouse had done what it needed to do for us, and it armed us with intellectual capacity, with the value system that we needed to go out into the world and to make a contribution in our respective professions. And hopefully we did.
So that leads us into this final segment, which is to talk about your professional life and how did you left Morehouse, you went to law school at University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill.
Right.
Talk to us, and you were the only African American in your class, is that right?
The only African American in my class. A class of about 388 students, and there was one member of the class ahead of me. And my senior year at Chapel Hill, the freshman class I think had 8 or 9 African Americans. But yes, I was the only one in my class, and there was only one in the class ahead of me. So we were, needless to say, not well represented. It's very interesting to see the recent decision, for example, that has come down from the Supreme Court, of course, involved 2 schools, Harvard as well as the University of North Carolina. And I must say that I felt so good that the University of North Carolina wanted to keep race as a factor in terms of their admission policy, because they recognize the importance of having a diversified student body, as did Harvard. And that was the reason why race was used as a factor in terms of their admission. It was not given more weight than other factors, but it was something to consider. And the University of North Carolina, in trying to uphold their admissions practice, really stressed the fact of the importance of having a diverse community. Not only do black students benefit from it, the entire student body benefits from it. And our cities and the nation benefits from diversity. And so it gave me some feeling of pride to see North Carolina, in particular UNC, fight to try to uphold their admissions protocol, if you will, or their admission guidelines, which included race. Because when I was there, needless to say, we only had just a few in the School of Law. And I'm sure that their admission guidelines were not what they are today. Unfortunately, the Supreme Court did not see fit. And we all know, we all understand that. 3 liberals on the court dissented. I was so proud of Justice Jackson, Sotomayor, Justice Sotomayor. They really, such strong dissents, and so eloquently stated in their dissents, just chastising really the majority for not recognizing the importance of race being used as a factor just as legacy and other considerations were taken into account.
Talk a bit about establishing and your early days in the law firm that is the oldest African American law firm in the state of Georgia, right?
Right.
Just tell us a bit about that. You've received numerous awards and honors and achievements and recognitions for your career as a lawyer coming from this firm. So talk about that a little bit.
My firm is in its 53rd year of existence, and we are the oldest African American firm in the state of Georgia. There were other firms started before ours, but they are no longer in existence. So at this point, we are the oldest in the state and one of the oldest in the entire southeastern United States. The firm was started by John Kennedy, Reuben Bussey, and I in the summer of 1964. I'm sorry, not the summer of 64. In the summer of 1971, when I graduated from Morehouse. I graduated from Morehouse in 1968, went to law school, came back to Atlanta, and it was in 1971, I'm sorry, that the firm was started. The name of the firm is Thomas Kennedy, Sampson, and Tompkins. I joined John Kennedy after he had been in practice for 4 or 5 weeks. He was the first African American lawyer hired by a downtown majority firm, where he had worked for a couple of years. He was 4 to 5 years my senior. He attended Morehouse College, graduated from Morehouse College. In fact, his father was one of the renowned professors at Morehouse College. Dr. Kennedy was his name. He was chair of the Department of History when I was a student there at Morehouse. And so John graduated from Harvard and was hired by Alston and Bird, and he was the first African American, as I mentioned, hired by a downtown firm. In the summer of 1971, he decided to leave Alston and Bird and went out on his own. And I joined John Kennedy and Reuben Bussey, who had been in practice 4 or 5 weeks when I joined them, and we were the founders, really, of the firm that has evolved since that time. The Thomas in the firm actually is a second cousin of mine, and he joined the firm about 12 to 15 years after we started in 71, when he was going into retirement, and we put his name out of respect for him and his contributions. He was a fabulous lawyer and an original member of a charter member of the Gate City Bar Association, which was founded in 1947. So when he joined us after maybe 10 years of our existence, we put his name first. R.E. Thomas Jr., Kennedy, Sampson, and then later Tompkins, each of whom has been a Morehouse man, has attended Morehouse, and carries the distinction of being a Morehouse man, which is very special to us.
So looking back at your career, what are you proudest about? What are some of the high marks that you recall, and what are What are your memories in terms of your career?
Well, one of the things about the firm that I'm the proudest of, we've always strived to be excellent in everything that we do. And having 4 Morehouse men as the named partners, you can imagine the importance to us of striving always to do our best, because that's how we were trained as Morehouse men. And so my firm, I'm proud of the fact that we have, I have 2 living partners now. My son is one, Woody Sampson. He's been with me for 25 years. I'm so proud of him. Jeff Tompkins is my other partner, who has been with me since, with the firm since 1986. He's a Morehouse man. They both are in best lawyers in America. They both are super lawyers, as am I. I've been a super lawyer and in best lawyers in America since 1993. And I'm proud of that, of the accomplishments of my firm and the legacy that we have built. But we owe it to so many people. We've had good people. We've had a wonderful staff. There have been 4 ladies who have been with the firm for an aggregate of over 150 years. And I always say that the lawyers may bring the bacon home, but the staff grinds the sausage. And those ladies, for example, our staff, have been so important to our firm and to what we have accomplished. So another thing about the firm of which I'm very proud is the fact that we have mentored so many people who have graced the halls of our firm and who've gone on to other great heights. For example, we've had 10 lawyers who have come through Thomas Kennedy who are now judges, we've got several on the superior courts of Fulton and DeKalb County. We've got a chief judge, a former chief judge of the state court of Fulton County. Our firm hired the first African-American district attorney in this state, Paul Howard, came through our firm. Patrice Perkins Hooker, the first African-American president of the State Bar of Georgia, came through our firm. So, as you can see, our legacy, so many people have contributed to my firm's legacy and to our success, for which we will forever be grateful. I'm just so thankful and filled with so much gratitude for their efforts and for what it's meant to our firm. So, as they say, it takes a village to raise a child, and by comparison, it's taken so many efforts by so many people to have helped us reach the place where we are at present, but we're still striving.
You received a Benny Award from Morehouse, and what year was that?
That was 2005 that I received the Benny Award, which was so special to me. It was a Trailblazer Award that I received, and I have received some other awards, but that award just holds a special place in my heart. I only wish my dad had been living at the time that I received that award. Unfortunately, he passed in the year 2000, and it was 5 years later that I received that award, and my mother had passed as well. But to be honored by Morehouse College in that manner was just the high point, clearly, of my life. It meant so much to me. that award is simply at the top of, there would never be an award that I would hold in greater
Well, I think we are about here to close out now. We could go on and on, probably another whole hour. But I just want to thank you, Attorney Sampson, for the opportunity to interview you today here on the campus of Morehouse College. It's been just absolutely insightful and just a pleasure.
Well, it's a pleasure for me to be here, and thank you for all that you do.
Thank you.